A special welcome to John, to Carmel, and to Padraig for coming to this meeting. We appreciate it greatly. I've been following your campaign for the last 2 decades, and I'm still absolutely dumbfounded that it's taken 50 years for justice to be recognised by the state in the north of Ireland. There was an incredible injustice done to the victims on those 3 days. That injustice was compounded by the defamation of their good name, compounded again by 50 years wait for the truth. And many people, when they look back on certain elements of the Troubles, they think that they exist in the past. But this shows you that injustice actually exists right up till now, which is an incredible thing. I welcome the fact that the full political spectrum has given such support to the families of the Ballymurphy massacre here. But one thing I would say is that there, and this has been mentioned before, there are many other groups of people in the north of Ireland that have been murdered. Their families have been murdered. They have been absolutely wronged, and they're still seeking justice. I think of Kelly's Bar, Spring Hill, the victims and the families of the Glenanne gang, 120 people murdered by elements and agents of the British state in a small location in the north of Ireland. An Aontú councillor of ours in Dungannon, her father was murdered in front of her, and she was at the age of 4 years old. Just recently she received a death threat from the murderer of her father in the name of the East Tyrone Brigade of the UVF. So for many people, this injustice resonates strongly in their lives today. I think one of the biggest tributes that maybe the southern political establishments can make to the families of the Ballymurphy family would be to make sure that no other campaign walks a lonely journey to justice in future. That's, all of those who are looking for justice now have the full energy of the southern state to make sure that they achieve justice for their families. And I'd like to hear your voices on that. And then just the other issue, obviously, when the British Army murdered citizens in Ballymurphy, that was the action of a rogue state. I think that's really important to say that. The withholding of justice from families is the action of a rogue state. The breaking of international agreements, such as the Stormont House Agreement, is the action of a rogue state. It needs to be called out. And I think, the Southern, I would like to propose that this committee would take legal advice to what actions that the Irish state can take to make sure that the British government fulfill their responsibilities to the international agreements that they have signed with the Irish state and with the parties in the north of Ireland. The Irish state should use all legal levers that it has in international law to make sure that justice is achievable, that the pathway to justice is not blocked by any family in the north of Ireland, and that justice is not withheld, and that agreements are not reneged upon.
I think I endorse Patter's comments in relation to the behaviour of the British government. In terms of the Irish government or Irish state action, we would welcome any consideration of any legal action they could take, and it may be alongside actions taken by families in the courts. The Irish state, of course, could consider any role for international law on this. I'm not best placed to comment at the minute. I think it's a good idea. I think the Irish government should look at that, and maybe this is something that the committee could bring up and keep an eye on and request a formal response from the Irish government, and keep in touch with the families on that. I would fully welcome the involvement of the Irish state. I mean, we have seen before they've taken the British government to court in the famous case of the Hooded Men. As an example of that, so that is a consideration worth looking at, and I thank Patter for that suggestion, and it should be followed up.
It's just Patter's comment, about it being a lonely road. It was a very lonely road, and other families shouldn't have to go through that. They should have the backup there. We used to have to go in and tell our story and convince people this is what happened. I would like to think any other family would have to do that. The Spring Hill massacre, we lost a second priest. Father Fitzpatrick was shot. That was less than 10 months after Father Mullen, and this all needs to be held accountable. The army were protected in 1971 by the British state, and they're trying to bring in amnesty. They're trying to protect them now. the families have nothing to hide. Anyone who lost anyone in the conflict deserves truth and accountability. This goes across the board. You know, the Irish state should use all its power to get behind families that are seeking some kind of truth and accountability.